Spoken there. I haven't thought about flying for a long time. I haven't dreamed of that moment when I was alone above the clouds for a long time. I haven't dreamed of waking up in a room surrounded in blue and green grass for more years than I could dream of remembering. I haven't walked back into the past or scratched on the doors of my origins, where it all came from, since I held up that cape for the last time.
Return to Kent Town 10th Year Anniversary Edition is a revised version of Andy N's first poetry book. The book can be purchased from Amazon and it contains numerous additional material.
Spoken Label. Hi, it's Andy N from Spoken Label. Thank you today for streaming or downloading another episode of Spoken Label. Spoken Label was originally set up on beginning of 2016 and as of speaking has currently nearly 300 sessions. The full archive is available on Spoken Label bandcamp.com. Although it is available for free for stream and download if you wish, I am always grateful for any sort of kind of donation to enable me to keep the running costs of this podcast going. And enjoy. Take care. Bye bye. Spoken Label. Hi guys, Andy N, Spoken Label, back in the house. We've got a lovely lady with me today as well, and called Carol Orange. Now, Carol is the actual writer of a book that's now just come out at the moment called Discerning Eye. And Carol, obviously, you've done a lot. You've certainly been around the place where you've been living as well. So obviously, tell people about. So it's quite a bit we can talk about here, because I want you to just first of all take everyone back to the beginning of where all your creativity came from, and we'll start from there.
Oh, okay. So thank you so much, Andy, for having me on your program today. So I majored in art history at Cornell University, and I've always been, really fascinated by art. After I graduated, I lived in London and worked on a book of Spanish art. It was in a series of art books. I worked for a British publisher, and my husband was an academic. He was researching his thesis. So my advisor on the book of Spanish art was named Xavier de Salas, and he was a very wonderful man. He later became the director of the Prado Museum. So then when we left London, my husband had a job in Boston, Massachusetts, and I worked at the Atlantic Monthly Press for a while, but my passion's always been art. So I had a gallery in Boston, and when the robbery at the Isabella Gardner Museum happened in 1990, March 18th at 1:30 in the morning, I was horrified, as well as everyone in the city of Boston, because the Isabella Gardner Museum is really a gem. It's a Venetian palace, and Isabella was very fortunate to be able to hire Bernard Berenson, who was leading expert in Renaissance art. So her collection included Renaissance art and some particularly amazing paintings like Titian's The Rape of Europa, which is actually now on loan at the National Gallery of Art in London. So, wow. Yeah, so I was horrified that this could happen in our, little city at our special gem of a museum, that 13 art objects were stolen. The thieves had the run of the place for 81 minutes, And so they took, 13 art objects, including one of my favorites, Vermeer's The Concert, and there are only 36 of Vermeer's paintings in
Wow.
existence.
Wow.
So it was heartbreaking, really,
Now,
really.
it's obviously the best, obviously, making people aware, obviously, about the book we're going to be talking about today. We obviously touched on it already, haven't we? So, which obviously is Discerning Eye, which obviously is talking about this topic itself. So, like I said, I remember when I spoke to your agent about this, I was just shocked by it completely. Okay, it's just it's something like you think you see in a movie near it, really. As you said already, they had 81 minutes inside this place completely. And it's like, to get away with 13 paintings like that, it's just absolutely incredible. I could agree with you completely in that. So now, obviously then, tell us about what made you want to write the book then, The Discerning Eye.
Okay, so in addition to being, an art historian, I also, studied English literature, and my dream was always to be a writer. I've had some short stories published, but I've had, other jobs, other interests. And so I never really gave myself the luxury of writing full time. So I was so angry that the police and the FBI weren't finding the artwork. And they, the FBI didn't seem to take the robbery as seriously as the rest of us in Boston. I mean, they were investigating the mafia for the cocaine trade. And so in the hierarchy of their endeavors, the investigating the art theft wasn't their number one priority. So I was so angry about this. And also they weren't mentioning the paintings. I mean, they mentioned, a particular Rembrandt of Christ crossing the Sea of Galilee, because it's the only painting like that Rembrandt did. I mean, he mainly did portraits. So I decided that I would analyze the stolen art and look at each painting and art object. And I found that there was a consistent underlying theme. It was the tension between dark and light that was apparent in the Degas drawings that they stole, in the Rembrandt paintings, including his self-portrait, and in the Manet Chez Tortoni, which was in another room downstairs. It's a small painting by Manet of this man who is all dressed up in his top hat and tails and sitting at a cafe, but half his face is in shadow. So I found this underlying theme, and I thought, I think that the thief stole the paintings that spoke to him, not the people who entered the museum. They were not really the ones who they just carried out orders. They were not stealing the paintings for themselves, but for someone else. This was my hypothesis. And so, the fact that the thief stole these specific paintings, not Titian's Rape of Europa, not Giotto's really precious little painting, not Michelangelo's drawing, which was right next to the Degas drawings, not the even more valuable Italian art. They stole specific paintings, mainly in the Dutch room and the nearby Short Gallery. And so, there was something behind this. It really felt like there was a shopping list. And so I started to write about it. And then, I had always been intimidated about writing a novel. A novel is a huge undertaking. It's not like a short story. But I said, I think I am going to write this novel. And it took me 10 years on and off. I mean, I had a full-time job, so I didn't write every minute in 10 years.
Yeah, of course, yeah. But I think you find that myself, because I'm a writer myself, and I've got the dreaded full-time job. And it's just trying to get time in it when you're dealing with your life outside writing to get the time to do it. Oh, wow, yeah. So did you find, when you got toward the end of the book, had it changed radically from when you first started it off?
Oh, yes, definitely. I had a character. I developed this character. There were two people posing as police who got into the museum. There were only 2 night guards, and they were students. And so I made one of the police a Asian man, and I traced his journey from Hong Kong, where he had been a fisherman, and then he worked in a Chinese restaurant in Boston. And I was really rather fond of him. So I created this character. And then at some point in his journey, he encounters the head of the Italian mafia in Boston. And so I realized as I was getting, towards the end of the novel, that there were just too many characters, and I sadly cut him out.
Oh. Yeah, I think sometimes you get to a stage like that, don't you? And when the book is getting so long, you've got to be ruthless sometimes, and otherwise you end up doing what as Tolkien would do, could write 1,400-page novels, and you can't. It's not realistic sometimes completely with that. So yeah. Now, I also want to ask you as well, because there's a couple of things to ask you today as well. I know obviously you've got an audible version of this knocking around as well. And I was going through the cast of this before, and I was impressed to see you've got Campbell Scott doing, obviously, who I know from being Mark Usher in House of Cards. It was one of my friend's favourite series is House of Cards. So I'm going to refer him over to the audio book for this, definitely so.
Well, Campbell is a very special person, and his wife, Kathleen McElfresh, is an actress. But I met Campbell and Kathleen in New York when I was living in New York. And, they are just wonderful, wonderful people. So, I met them through some documentary filmmakers that I knew. Campbell had been the moderator for one of the films that they made. And I mean, he's just such a talented actor. And he's from, what I call acting royalty. His father was George C. Scott, and his mom was Colleen Dewhurst, and both extraordinary actors. So
you call it in England, he's an actor.
Okay. Anyway, I'm very fond of them, so I negotiated this I asked him if he would do it, and then I negotiated this with his agent, and then we found a recording studio near where he was living in Connecticut, because it was during the height of the pandemic, and there was no way he could come to New York. But I was really thrilled, because aside from being super talented, he's one of the most gracious people you could ever hope to meet.
That's as well.
So
in some ways, obviously, when it's in the height of lockdown, it's not a bad thing for an actor, that, because like his availability was probably more. He probably could have probably done the project for you much more easily. And I suspect because you knew him anyway, didn't you? Like I said, he would have done it for you anyway. But like I said, over lockdown, he's got probably more time for you, probably hasn't he, to give it the attention it needs.
Yes. No, I really think the audio version turned out really well. And it was great to have Kathleen. She did the beginning, and she can be a bit of a comic.
Yeah, and you sent the link over to me. I was really impressed. I thought, because your agent sent over the actual mob to me to have a look at, and then she said I got a copy of the audio book as well, and I was sat there thinking, this is fantastic. Both the books are really good, but but the audio book, what I've heard of it is sometimes if you get a really good voice artist doing it for you, it can make a big difference, I think, sometimes.
Yes, I think a huge difference. I listened to The Splendid and the Vile, the audiobook, and the British actor, I can't remember his name right now, but he imitated so many different accents, and he really made it come to life. And I think that's what really talented audiobook actors do.
Completely. My partner Amanda, and she's a novelist herself, and I know she was listening to last two Philip Pullman books, and if my memory is correct, they were both narrated by Michael Sheen, if you're familiar with him as an actor. And and I know she was saying it really brought them to life. He did. She enjoyed him anyway, but he did make a difference to it. So no, I agree with you completely with that. So now I want to ask you as well, because one thing we've not touched on. I know you were living in Paris at one point, weren't you, as well?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I did live in Paris. Lucky me. I lived there from 1990 to 92. It was a self-imposed sabbatical. I knew, through my art gallery, I knew a Parisian woman who was really wonderful. And the art market everywhere at that time was really tough. And I had so many people owing me money from, that had purchased art, including banks, as a matter of fact, that I said, well, I'm going to do what I can to collect the money that I can, but I never went into the art world to be a money collector. So my husband and I, we rented our house, and we, went off to live in Paris. And that's really when I began to take my writing more seriously. And, I joined a writing group. I studied French. And I also researched the life and writing of Georges Sand, who was formidable. And 100 books in her lifetime. Oh my gosh.
Wow,
and all her fascinating lovers, including, Frédéric Chopin. So I had a lot of fun going to the Bibliothèque Nationale and researching her life. And then I would go to the 9th arrondissement where the Romantics, that's what they were called, where the Romantics lived. So I saw where she lived. And then I went to her country house, Nohant, in, the heart of France. It's called the Berry region. And
wow.
Yeah, she really was extraordinary because she couldn't get published except under a male pseudonym. Women had absolutely no rights. And, she raised 2 children. Her husband was, I would say he was abusive, so she did somehow manage to divorce him. And one of her lovers was her lawyer, and he helped her. He helped her hold on to her grandmother's chateau, which is in Nohant. But she was really interesting because her mother was the daughter of a bird seller in Paris.
Oh, right, right. Wow.
Yeah, he would sell birds along the Seine. And
Wow.
her father was in the military, and he was from, a sort of lesser nobility, as it were. So she was extraordinary, just extraordinary. So I had a lot of fun researching her life. I read not all 100 books, but quite a few. And then when I returned to Boston, one of my neighbors in Boston was a concert pianist. So we put on a series of salons at the French Library in Boston. And she played Chopin, and I read from Georges Sand's writing, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Wow. You can say, I think, am I right in thinking, obviously, living in France like you did, that probably really got you going with it, with your writing, really, didn't it? As to, it led into the book we're obviously here to talk about today. So it feels like it there, because I think that was like a trigger to you, really, wasn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
Say it straight away, yeah. Now, I've got to ask you a quick question about the book, because there's something I forgot to ask you before as well, and was based about the lead character. Now, there's a quote I've noticed got on the Boston Globe where obviously your main character in the book is Portia Malatesta. Have I got that right?
Portia.
Portia. My pronunciation's crap at the best of times. I'll be honest. But I loved what you put here, and this came up in the Boston Globe. I love the fact where you said in this where the comparisons like you twin and that the character were similar, but you then quoted, "She's much braver than I am." Added in the novel, she was willing to risk her life, tangling with dangerous criminals to get the stolen paintings back. Now,
right.
Did you feel when you were creating that main character? Obviously, there was a lot of you in that main character, because I think there is writers anyway. But did you find like it was hard to actually make it more fictional?
Yeah, no, I think, Portia Malatesta was a very, I would say, idealized version of who I would love to be. I mean, we do share the love of art, and we are both sleuths in a way. I'm always wondering why this happened, why that happened, and look for the clues. Ever since the days when I read Agatha Christie and Nancy Drew.
Oh, wow.
So, but Portia actually does risk her life going to Medellin, Colombia, where the FBI believes that they have a hot lead of who the mastermind of this theft was. And, she goes there during a time when, Pablo Escobar was running the cocaine trade, and it was a pretty lethal time. I mean, people were killed. There were lots of drive-by shootings in the barrio, and her husband rightly did not want her to risk her life going there, but she felt she had to for 2 reasons. One was her brother Antonio loved Vermeer's The Concert, And he was an artist, and that was his favorite painting. And they used to sit at the Gardner and look at this painting together. So she lost her brother. He committed suicide, and she was devastated. And so when the concert was stolen, it was like whatever, it was like Antonio's soul was stolen again. And she had to help find the artwork for him and also for Isabella Gardner, because she resonated to Isabella Gardner's very strong-willed personality, because Isabella Gardner went through a lot of tragedy too. She lost her son when he was very young. So
yeah, of course. I understand completely. So yeah. Now that's pretty well covered all my questions on obviously the book today. But I've got to ask you a couple of quick questions in addition to conclude with. And the one I always like asking is, what plans do you have next for your creativity? And I know you're currently writing another novel, aren't you, at the moment? Which seems to be interesting enough. I was teasing off Mike before about this, about art theft. And I was starting to wonder here, are you a secret bank robber or something, or an art gallery theft thief? You're not told me.
Well, no, I mean, I do. I mean, we could talk for hours about art theft. I think it's a fascinating subject. Why do people steal art? What motivates them to steal art? And my next book is about Nazi stolen art. I mean, Hitler and Goering were avid art collectors, and they put together incredible collections. Hitler was planning this museum in Linz, and they used all kinds of horrible ways of obtaining, illegal, horrible ways of obtaining art, many from, Jewish families that they were persecuting, but also, wasn't exclusively Jewish families. They just were so greedy. And, Goering is quoted as saying, well, when I look at great art, it just makes me feel so good. I mean, he felt entitled to do what he did. And so, I won't go into Hitler's personality because that's been too well documented, but Goering really was a very, it wasn't just that he was greedy, he felt that owning art enhanced his life, enhanced his personality. So, some people steal art just because they think they can sell it. I mean, they just grab what's closest to the door and of a museum or a church or some place where art exists, and they think they can sell it on the black market. But in the case of Goering and Hitler, it was to enhance their lives. So the motivation behind it really does fascinate me. I mean, it horrifies me, but it also fascinates me that people can be so obsessed with this that they are willing to do this. And so that's what my second book is about. It's Portia and Julian Henderson, who worked at the FBI and the art crime team. They are now working together as private investigators, and they're going to Germany for a family in Cambridge, Massachusetts that wants their patrimony.
Brilliant. Good luck with it, definitely. So hopefully this won't take you 10 years to write this one.
No, I can promise you it won't.
But I know it's a quick question, obviously, before we conclude, obviously, like I will ask you. But what do you think to the myth, like I say, the first novel is always the most difficult book to write? And then obviously after that, everything's easier, really. I've read writers saying that before.
Well, I think it's easier in the sense that I'm no longer intimidated because I've done it. But writing a novel is really a labor of love.
Oh, yeah, completely.
Yeah,
Completely.
I mean, the amount of revisions that you do until you get it right, so it all hangs together, is really remarkable. No one ever told me that it would be so hard, but it is very rewarding. I mean, when you're sitting alone with your computer and writing, I mean, the time just flies and it's so much fun. You know, it's so exciting. It's like, oh, I created this character who doesn't exist in real life, even though I may have done a lot of research on the subject. But it is. I'm already on my first draft, chapter 23. And I know it's not going to take me 10 years. Hopefully.
Good. It depends. If you go for like write 300 of more chapters, then it might take you 10 years.
No.
No, good luck with it, Carol. Definitely, seriously. Okay, keep in touch with us. Let us know how you're going with it. So now, if people want to find out more about you, just to wrap up, obviously you've got your website, haven't you? So I'm presuming your website's the best place for you people to go to find out more about you, isn't it? Really?
Yes, and it's a very easy website to go to, which is www.carolorange.com. And by the way, Orange is my real name. It's my maiden name.
I wasn't going to ask that because I'm always a believer. Let the person tell me. I was wondering actually if that was your real name, actually. So that's why.
Yes.
But it's one way. I suppose, like I said, doing that, it makes life easier for people to find you on the net, doesn't it? Really? Because if like your maiden name was Carol Smith, it'd be like
no, that's hard. That's really, really hard. Yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, I know you're going to do a little extract as we book for us. So hang around, everybody, because I've really enjoyed today, Carol. So thank you for this. I've really enjoyed this.
Oh, thank you so much, Andy. I really enjoyed it. It's been great. Thank you for the interview, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend with your family. So,
come on, I'll tell you about that off mic in a minute, definitely. So because it's busy time over here. But we'll see you all in part 2, guys. See you in a minute. Spoken, mate. Hi, guys. I'm still here with Carol, and she's going to do a short extract of us for a book. Over to you, Carol.
Thank you, Andy. Okay, chapter 7, March 27th, 1990. The mafia had to be involved. As the days went by, the talk in the media about the art theft dwelt on false leads and dead ends. Although the museum had reopened, the staff was still in shock. Visitors stood without talking in front of the Dutch rooms, empty frames. Shortly after the robbery, the museum decided to keep the plundered walls as they had been left. The empty frames served as a constant reminder to the public of their loss, and by keeping the stolen masterpieces alive, so to speak, the staff hoped for their imminent return. To Portia's dismay, no one had been caught with the paintings hidden in a truck or a van. The collective voice of the newscasters was still focused on the theory that a network of art thieves had committed the crime. Yet Portia remained convinced one person had masterminded the robbery. If only to honor her brother's memory, she was determined to continue analyzing the paintings until she could draw a profile of the thief. Also, her museum, the museum where she worked as a docent, The Museum of Isabella deserved her full attention. Portia was even willing to enlist Nick Moretti's help. She now realized she must overcome her revulsion about the mafia, because in this case, they could be useful. Her gut instinct told her the mafia was somehow involved in the heist. Possibly the faux policemen were trained henchmen. Who else but the mafia would do this dirty work? Nick had told her the underworld had a network of its own, and gossip about who did what to whom traveled along its wires. She'd asked Nick to put her in touch with some of those very men. Maybe one of them knew where the paintings were hidden.
Fantastic, brilliant, brilliant. Obviously, not as rich as Campbell's voices, but still very, very well read indeed.
Quite
Brilliant. I really, brilliant. Thank you today for that, Campbell. I've really, really enjoyed this. So hang around. I do need to speak to you off mic and sort out a couple of technical things before we conclude tonight. But it's been a pleasure today. I've really, really enjoyed this.
Well, me too, Andy. Thank you so much, and have a great Father's Day in Manchester.
Thank you.
Okay.
As Don Callis says, guys and girls, to conclude over Impact Wrestling, stay safe and stay over, and we'll see you all soon. Spoken, mate.